Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
With the first pick, the Detroit Pistons select Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State University.
Chandler again. Oh, what a block by Maxfield! My goodness!
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
There's Jaden playing the passing lane. Skies a jam. Dynamite dunk, and the crowd loves it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing. Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano. Joining me is the full cast and crew of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia. Fellas, it's good to have all three of us back on finally a juicy day in the NBA.
It's been a long time. It feels like since all three of us have been here. I'm excited to talk about it. We've got to talk about the schedule release that came out today as we're recording. And then we've got a fun little next topic, secondary topic, some questions that Mike is going to run Jasper and I through. So super excited to get into all that and be here with both of you today, my fellas.
Yeah, this is like, I feel so energized by having real slop. You're right, Mike. This is a juicy NBA day. This schedule goes dummy thick. So I can't wait to get into it with you guys. This should be a fun one. Yeah, there's a lot to break down with the Pistons schedule this year. It's a weird one, not just for the Pistons, but for the NBA in general. And we have a couple new things. We have the play-in tournament, the in-season tournament. We also have the NBA's rivalry week, or lack thereof, as we should say.
It's made up.
Yep, but we have a lot to talk about. I'm excited to get into it with the full crew this week.
Well, let's go ahead and get right into it. Before we talk about the Pistons schedule, which thank God it came out on the day of the podcast, or else we were about to be talking about Jaden Ivey's hair again. Before we get into the schedule talk, I'd like to thank our sponsor for this week, and that is BetOnline. And BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head on over to the website today or use your mobile device to sign up. Get in on the action. Just make sure that you use the promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Again, that promo code is BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts. It was NBA schedule reveal day, and we kind of got a little morsel of it yesterday when the in-season tournament, or as I have also referred to it a million times, the play-in tournament. Eventually, I will get this right, but it's the in-season tournament. Got a little taste of it yesterday with the Pistons 4 group play games. But we got the full reveal this afternoon. The Pistons will open the season October 25th in Miami. The point guard for the Heat to be determined. The home opener is October 28th against the Chicago Bulls. They will have one nationally televised game against none other than the Houston Rockets on January 12th, which I saw on Twitter is one day before NFL wildcard weekend. So they're really just shoehorning the teams that they don't want to really put on real national TV right before people forget about basketball once again entirely. The Pistons will have 15 back-to-backs. They have a 6-game road trip in February, and 9 of their last 11 games will be on the road to end the season. So bit of a daunting end to the year for the Pistons. 9 of 11 on the road. So Aaron, you've got a lot of notes in here. I just wanted to get your guys' initial reaction to some of those things. The home opener, the 28th against the Bulls. The Pistons will open the season the 25th against the defending Eastern Conference champion Miami Heat with 15 back-to-back. So Aaron, I'll give you the floor first. What are your initial thoughts on the Pistons schedule that was revealed here this afternoon?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get like too in the weeds on the schedule, but I think it looks, just from glancing at it, that it looks easier than it did last year. It just felt like last year, especially the start of the season last year for the Pistons, they had such a tough schedule right out of the go, a lot of tough opponents, a lot of games on the road. And it feels like this year it's a little bit lighter on that for Detroit. Obviously, the 15 back-to-backs, it seems a little backwards for the NBA to be saying, "Hey, we don't want teams playing on such little rest." You know, we're that's what we feel is one of our biggest concerns. It's attributing to load management and injuries and things like that. But hey, let's give the Pistons and other teams more back-to-backs than they've had each of the last 2 seasons. So that's probably my biggest concern or negative thought on the schedule. There's a lot more, it feels like this year, games where it's like a stretch of 4 games at home and then 4 or 5 games on the road, where it's, you know, there's not as many, hey, the Pistons are playing 1 or 2 games at home, then they're on the road for 2-3 games, back at home. It feels like there's a lot of stretches where they're gone for 4 in a row, back for 4 in a row, that type of thing. I mean, they're going to play 41 games at home, 41 games on the road. You know, some people don't feel that anything else matters and that the schedule doesn't really matter. I think it does matter. I think there are some statistics that you can look at that prove that how the schedule shakes out does matter. And it's not just a, hey, they're going to play the same number of games as every other team. I don't think this schedule is necessarily a super, super difficult one. It's definitely not an easy one, but I think it's easier than last year, especially at the beginning of the year, which I think is going to be important for Detroit, who's integrating a lot of new pieces and just bringing Cade Cunningham back into the fold, getting him, you know, ready and back into game action. I think it's gonna be nice for them to not have as tough of a schedule to start the year. But yeah, it just feels like the NBA as a whole has these goals for its schedule, but never properly addresses them to make it work. Whereas there's not a million back-to-backs, and it just sets up another year where load management is going to be a major issue again.
Yeah, this is a really weird schedule, and I'm with you on that, Aaron. I do think it's an easier schedule than last year. You know, they do have an extra back-to-back. They played 14 last year. They played 13 the year before, but they have one less 3 and 4, which are, you know, 3 games in 4 nights. They have one less of those this year. So I think it kind of evens out. And more so than that, you can tell that the NBA has put a concerted effort into evening out the schedule for these teams across the board. You're getting, you know, less teams that have an advantage in terms of back-to-backs. You know, you would have last year teams playing 17 back-to-backs and other teams playing 12. Now it's a lot more even. That being said, this is a very dumb schedule, and that's really how I feel about it. You're totally right when you say they start off easier. I know we got onto the podcast last year when the schedule was revealed and we looked at those first 10 games and we went, I mean, best case scenario, they're winning 3. This year, you feel like they could probably go, you know, they have to win a game off of a team that's better than them, but you feel like they could probably go 5-5 in their first 10. And I know that doesn't seem like that's a lot, but genuinely, I think when you can come out of the gate as a young team and have some success, at least show that you can be competitive at the beginning of the year, I think it goes a long way in building up your confidence when you're young, when you don't have that experience, when you have a new head coach. I genuinely do think that goes a long way. They also, and this is a really weird one, in March, they played 9 out of 10 games from March 7th to the 24th at home. And then right after that, they play 9 of their last 11 games of the season on the road. It's super strange. I will say the West Coast trips, I think, are a lot easier. They basically do 2 West Coast trips. They're playing Houston, Utah, Golden State, and Denver at one point. And then right before the All-Star break, they play Sacramento, Portland, both LA teams, and Phoenix. And they have decent rest in between those games, even though they have some back-to-backs. So I think that is definitely going to be to their advantage as well. So there's good and bad to the schedule for the Pistons this year. It's more interesting than it has been in years past for me, because there's just a lot more weirdness to it. If there's one advantage they have, it's that they have the third fewest miles traveled of any team in the league this year. They were 15th last season, so that kind of helps you a little bit with the rest, especially since you are playing more back-to-backs than any other team in the league. It's a mixed bag. Ultimately, though, and here's my real issue with the schedule, is that it flies directly in the face of what the NBA has been saying they prioritize and what they see as being the solution to load management, to players sitting out games, to fans feeling like teams and players are not giving it their all on every single night. And Adam Silver has said this. Oh, it's the back-to-backs. Oh, it's the 3 and 4s. Oh, this is why it's not the amount of games, it's the rate of games that they're playing and the rest in between them. But that doesn't make any sense. How can you say that and then have teams still playing 15 back-to-backs, have teams still playing 13, 14 stretches of 3 games in 4 days, and then also say with a straight face, oh, well, the solution isn't to, go down to 72 games. The solution is to give players more rest. Do you just not care? Or are you a liar? Or is it really the answer is kind of a combination of all three, and Adam Silver's just greedy and doesn't want to lose out on any money? If I had to place my bet, I think that'd be where I'd put my money on. So, Mike, I don't know if you have a different look at it as well. It's a weird schedule for me. I think it's a better schedule than last year's, but it's definitely a weird one. And there are going to be some really strange stretches of play this season, I think.
Yeah, finishing the year with 9 of 11 games on the road is pretty strange. You had alluded to it in the group chat that if the Pistons are in the playoff, or rather the play-in conversation, they're going to have a tough road to finish out, quite literally, tough road to finish out the season. The rivalry week is very strange, and you can get to that in a second, considering a lot of those teams are not really rivalries. But if you look at some of the games to end the season, let's just say that the Pistons are moving towards being in the play-in. They're going to have a gauntlet at the end of March, leading into April. Just starting with like March 15th or so, they're going to get Miami back-to-back. They're going to get Boston. So there's 3 playoff teams. Indiana should be quite a bit better. They get Boston again. They get the Pelicans, who theoretically will have Zion back. They'll get the Knicks playoff team, the Timberwolves playoff team, probably pull off a win against Washington, but again, that's away. Then they face Memphis 2 out of 3 games with Atlanta sandwiched. They play Philly, and then they end the year with Dallas and against the San Antonio Spurs for the final game. You got a lot of playoff teams in there, a lot of teams that could be fighting for seeding just as much as the Pistons are. Really weird to have so many away games at the end of the year. So that kind of stuck out as strange. The travel thing that you had mentioned is definitely a clear advantage. But you know what? Even with back-to-backs, this is still a pretty young roster that's probably going to hopefully be more fresh than maybe the average playoff team that is maybe has more vets and is just trying to glide their way through the end of the season without getting hurt. But a weird schedule for Detroit. I mean, 15 back-to-backs is very odd. 6-game road trip is a little odd. I mean, and it's in February, so that's just going to be a slog to get through. So definitely weird. Jasper, did you want to touch on rivalry week, which is just bizarre?
Absolutely. I will say, lastly, on the 9 of the last 11 games coming on the road, I don't think that's so bad. I might be overthinking it, but I actually think that's kind of good for the Pistons, because you know what? At that point, especially coming off that big homestand, they're going to know exactly where they stand in the play-in picture. If they're still in it, that's great. you have such an amazing opportunity to prove that you are a legitimate team on the rise by overcoming that adversity. And guess what? If you're not in the play-in race, that doesn't matter that all those games are coming on the road, because you're probably going to be tanking at that point anyway. So I actually think I'd rather have that stretch come way at the end of the season than in the middle or at the beginning, if it's going to happen. Yeah, in terms of the rivalry week thing, I think that this is, and we can quickly touch on the play-in tournament, or excuse me, the in-season tournament as well, where the Pistons, I think, play 4 games and they lose all 4 of them. The rivalry is just, it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm looking at some of these matchups, like the Spurs and the Timberwolves, or it's not Spurs and the Trailblazers, like
Classic.
what? Oh yeah, 2 teams spurned by LaMarcus Aldridge. That's what it's for. It's the battle for LaMarcus Aldridge's heart. The most, I think, to me, the most bizarre one though, and there are some really bizarre ones like Mavericks and Hawks. The battle of who drafted Trae Young and who drafted Luka Doncic. The weirdest one has to be Spurs and Thunder. These are 2 teams that have been in the Western Conference. Spurs have been around for 47 years in the NBA. Do you know how many times they have faced the Seattle Supersonics / the Oklahoma City Thunder in the playoffs? 5 total. They've played in the conference finals once, the year that Durant, Westbrook, Harden team went to the finals. 1 time they've met in the Western Conference Finals. 5 total playoff matchups. How on earth is this a rivalry? How on earth? And you could say, oh, well, 1 team drafted Scoot, 1 team drafted Victor. So what? That's not a rivalry. That's nothing.
It is now.
That's the, oh yeah, you're my rival. You picked 1 pick before me. Death to you. Come on, it's ridiculous. I don't know what the NBA is doing here, and it's kind of like a symptom of the overall, like my issues with the schedule overall. It's just some of this stuff just doesn't make any sense. It's like, what are you trying to accomplish here? It's the same thing with a play-in tournament. What are you really trying to accomplish here? Do you think this is going to drive ratings? Do you think this is going to get any fan base excited or pumped up? I have such a hard time seeing any of this being meaningful in any way. And it's one of the biggest issues I have with the Adam Silver regime. It's this like constant fabrication of drama, this constant fabrication of rivalries and meaning that just doesn't exist. And it's all 100% just for profit motive. That's 100% what it is. I don't even think it's paying off. That's the ridiculous thing. Like, really, at the end of the day, what fans want to watch is great basketball. And that is why, despite all the hand wringing and all the people crying and filling their diapers about the NBA Finals, this last NBA Finals was one of the highest rated they've ever had. Why do you think that is, maybe? Do you think it's maybe because fans want to watch good basketball? And maybe not because they care about the New York Knicks being good 70 years ago? To me, it's just ridiculous. Aaron, I don't know if you have anything to touch on this as well. I just think that this is one of the most ill-advised and contrived excuses I've ever seen to try and put butts in seats. I truly think it's pathetic.
It's not a terrible idea in and of itself. I think it's an interesting concept, and I think it could be great. It's just they completely missed the mark on the large majority of these matchups. And I'm not going to repeat everything you said, but it's just some of the teams that are included and some of the matchups that are included in this just make absolutely no sense. Not that the Pistons, this isn't me saying that because the Pistons aren't included. It's just these matchups don't have the, at least in my mind, a rivalry means there's legitimate history between these 2 teams. And in some of these cases, that's just not the case at all, or not in a significant way whatsoever. It's just, yeah, they completely missed the mark on what in a vacuum is a great idea. They just didn't put all the pieces together, and it doesn't fit properly. It's not as good as what it could have been.
No, you're completely right, Aaron. It's not a terrible idea in and of itself. You're totally right. It's the execution and the fact that they're trying to sell it as being an actual rivalry week when it's not. I mean, you have the Mavericks The Mavericks' rivals in this are the Hawks and the Suns. Ask anybody who's a basketball fan in Texas. The Spurs and the Rockets. Those are the rivals. And yeah, I mean, like, perhaps it's us being self-aggrandizing as Pistons fans, but how on earth are the Pistons not in here? Talk about a franchise that, like, 95% of the NBA has hated at one point of another. I mean, come on. Bulls, Pistons, they might have had a little bad blood back in the day. Have you ever heard of that? Did you guys know that that the Celtics and the Pistons didn't like each other very much? Have you heard of that? It's not like there's been multiple documentaries made on all this stuff, where people are still rehashing stuff that happened 30 years ago, right? But no, the Pistons, beloved NBA franchise, no rivals, everybody loves us. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. A decent idea, terrible execution. Like I think the play-in tournament is going to end up.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you wanted a real rival week, then it would be everybody against Golden State, because they were probably the most recent. Everybody hates this team. They had picked up the mantle with KD. Yeah, I mean, some of these are weird, but I get it. But the general NBA fan that isn't tuned in, maybe as tightly as we are, would probably not get it. I mean, Brooklyn and the Knicks, fine. They're constantly going at each other on social media, but that's Mike, just
I live in New York. Let me tell you, they don't care.
Good point.
They don't care. The Nets fans do not care about. They like the Knicks. Like, Nets fans are halfway support the Knicks. Knicks fans don't think about Nets fans at all, ever.
But what I mean is, like, for the general fan, is you could see that, like, geographically, that at least makes sense. Clippers, Lakers, it makes sense. The Thunder and the Spurs does not. The Mavs and the Hawks does not make a whole lot of sense unless you know what happened with Trae Young and Luka Doncic and the trade. Some of these just make no sense. I mean, the Kings and the Warriors, they just played in the playoffs last year. That's it. It's not anything other than that, really. I mean, the Kings had no rivalry for years, like more than a decade, while they were floundering at the bottom of the West. I mean,
the Kings' biggest rival is relevancy.
Right. It was right. Yeah, it was Vlade Divac. That's who they should have had, was the Kings against Vlade, because that was the largest rival. But yeah, it's odd. And the play-in tournament, I talked about this on another show. The play-in tournament is just going to be a feel it out type of event. I mean, it's odd. It's going to be odd to have games matter in November. I mean, quote unquote matter. It's $500,000 for each player that is on the winning team that wins the NBA Cup, which is a terrible name. But squished into the schedule is the in-season tournament, which Jasper had a good segue towards. The Pistons are going to be playing the 76ers on November 10th. They're going to be hosting the Hawks on the 14th, and then they're going to play at Cleveland on the 17th and at Indiana on the 24th, and those will be the 4 group play games before moving on to the next stage, which I think is the knockout stage, if I had read that correctly. None of these games are national television, but the 76ers and the Hawks at home, and then Cleveland and Indiana on the road in the month of November. Jasper, you were talking about the in-season tournament earlier. I am a little skeptical of it, but I think it's going to be something that players are going to have to feel out to see how much they really care about it. And what are your overall thoughts on the in-season tournament? Probably similar to rivalry week.
I mean, a little less. I think that's one of those things where we will see if it works, right? We'll see how much the players care. I do think they will matter. Like, the only way you could do it and make it work, I will give them this, is to have those play-in games, as we're calling them, be regular season games for these teams, because there's an incentive to play your best players and to try hard, even outside of the tournament itself. So I think that from that perspective, they did a good job. That was the correct decision. I I think when you get to those knockout stages, I really wonder. I mean, if you're a playoff team, like, what is your incentive to play your starters for an extra 2-3 games? I just don't see that. And for $500,000, like, again, it makes a lot of sense for back of the bench guys, but I mean, God, Jaylen Brown's going to be making what, $60 million a year? You think he really cares about 500 grand? I don't know. I have a hard time seeing these games, once you get past the regular season aspect of it, mattering. Aaron, I don't know if you have a different perspective on it, but that's how I see it.
Nope, I'm in agreement. I mean, like you said, these guys making $50 million a year, they are not worried about the 500 grand, the $1 million that's on the line in the play-in tournament. It just, I don't see how it's going to matter to them. I don't see how any of those teams or those players really get up for that type of event. I mean, maybe for the younger teams, it helps. It gets them that type of playoff atmosphere type of event where there's a little more pressure. But again, if they're playing teams that have these bigger name guys that aren't playing or aren't trying, or, you know, it just doesn't matter to them, then they're really not going to get that type of high pressure environment where they're playing teams who are playing at their highest levels. So we'll see. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's great. Obviously, I want the basketball to be the best it can be, but yeah, I'm gonna have to see it to believe that there's a legitimate buy-in behind this product.
Ultimately, where I fall on it is like, here's the problem. You had to make those games regular season games in order to make every team compete for them. But the problem there is that the teams that would actually be incentivized to win the tournament and to play their players there, because it could actually represent some sort of success for the season, the teams that are not making the playoffs, that are not title contenders, well, those teams are likely going to be knocked out. It's very unlikely that they're going to be in the actual knockout games. So when you get to that point, my biggest worry is that you're going to have a bunch of teams that don't care about the knockout games, whereas the teams that would care about those knockout games have already been eliminated because they lost in the regular season. So I think, you know, they kind of were between a rock and a hard place. You had to make those games matter. But the downside of it is when you actually get to the games that matter for this particular tournament, it's hard to see teams actually giving.
Right. So we're kind of all in agreement that it's going to be a feel it out. Let's see if the players really care about some games at the beginning of the season, which is normally a time when teams are tinkering with their lineups and figuring out rotations and and whatnot. ESPN's Bobby Marks said that the natural evolution of the play-in tournament to make it more enticing is that the winner is guaranteed a playoff spot at the end of the season.
Terrible idea. Aaron, I would actually like to hear, do you think that's a good idea, Aaron? I think that's a horrible idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more to say. That's just not, it's not it. It's not a good idea. No, absolutely not.
You have an 82 game season to determine who makes the playoffs, and one team only has to win, not even win 6 games, win like 5 out of 6 games, or 5 out of 7 games, right, whatever it is, in order to, 6 out of 7 games to make the playoffs. That's just defeats the entire purpose of having an 82 game regular. Can you imagine if, like, for the Tigers get to make the playoffs because they sweep one series with like the Indians or something? How absurd.
It's absurd. It's really weird. It's also a terrible idea, but it's an interesting thought of like, okay, what do we need to do to get guys to care about the play-in tournament? I mean, guaranteeing the playoffs is an extreme reward for winning the play-in, and it's definitely stupid. If you could win 6 games between November and December and you make the playoffs, what are these guys going to do? Then you have an entirely new tanking problem, or rather DNP coach's decision for the rest of the year, as that team just preps for the playoffs in 4 months.
Mike, Joel Embiid might play 7 games. Just play Joel Embiid for 7 games a season, right? Play
right.
LeBron James actually could play till he's 60. All he's got to do is play 7 games a year. Why not?
Right. The jumper is the last thing that goes. So he could feasibly just ride this out. So it's a terrible idea, but it's at least an interesting thought exercise of what could it take for players to care that early in the season, because that's what it's going to come down to. And also, as soon as an injury happens, the moment an injury happens, it's probably game over. A game that you would have seen Kawhi Leonard, to use an example, a game where Kawhi Leonard maybe would have traditionally not played a back-to-back or would not have played for injury management on his knee, but suddenly he's playing for, to win this in-the-season tournament, injures his knee for a third time, season's over. God forbid it happens in the championship game in Vegas, which does not count towards the regular season win total, nor do the stats count for seasonal stats. But let's just say it happens in a championship game, somebody gets hurt in a 83rd game that they're not supposed to be playing. The NBA Players Union would be having a heart attack, and they would be preparing to boycott the NBA. So it's going to be a tricky tightrope to walk, but it's at least a compelling thought of how do we get guys to care? Let's just say that it goes poorly this year. I mean, going back to the drawing board for next year, they're going to have to come up with something that's a little more enticing, but a guaranteed playoff spot's just a little bit too far. Guys, anything else on the schedule being released?
Oh.
Any of the Christmas Day games entice you as a general NBA fan?
Well, I was going to say the Pistons have one real national game.
Oh, yes.
I wanted to say that. They do have one actual televised game. They have 3 NBA TV games. Those don't count.
Right.
Those just might as well not be televised. They have one game on ESPN against the Rockets. Shoot, why not put Rockets Pistons for rivalry week?
That's much more of a rivalry than some of those other games, for sure.
Genuinely, there is a little bit of bad blood, and shoot, the only time they let those teams play on national TV is against each other too. So,
well, there's bad blood, and now you have the Thompson twins, just added on top of that. So makes a whole lot of sense. But yes, they do have a legit play on ESPN game. I think Charlotte is playing on that day as well. So it's a weird
just
day.
a throwaway day for ESPN. They're just like, all right, we'll get all the bad.
Like I said, it's the day before NFL wildcard weekend.
Yeah, they know.
Yeah, they had a plan in mind. Christmas Day games, obviously the Pistons are not one of those, but Bucks, Knicks, Warriors, Nuggets, Celtics, Lakers for the 5 o'clock, 76ers, Miami, and then Dallas, Phoenix for what seems like the 8th year in a row. Any of the Christmas games interest you? Because now the NBA is going to be going up against the NFL for.
I wish the NBA could just have its day, because I look forward to Christmas NBA every year. I mean, I really genuinely look forward to it. And I know that when I go over family's house on Christmas Day, it's going to be a battle to get that TV. The NFL is going to really make that an issue. I'm going to have to bring a second screen or something, or go sit in a quiet room somewhere else to watch the games, because that is very unfortunate. The NFL had to step in there and ruin that. But I look forward to Christmas Day basketball every year. So I like some of the matchups. I mean, they're pretty predictable. You know what you're going to get. You're going to get
super predictable.
You're going to get the same top teams, the same top bigger name franchises every year. But I still love it. There's just something special about Christmas NBA to me. So I look forward to it. I'm excited for it.
I'm with you, Aaron. I love Christmas NBA games. They're always just fun. some of like the best regular season games happen on Christmas as well. Mike, I'm sure you definitely remember the matchups that the Cavaliers and the Warriors had. I mean, amazing regular season games. Those are always so memorable. Yeah, it is a shame that they will be competing with the NFL this year, but Roger Goodell will not stop until he has destroyed everything in his path, as is his prerogative. But yeah, ultimately, I think that's kind of a shame. For me, I'm kind of with you, Aaron. I just like it. The thing I'm most intrigued to see is what it would take for the Knicks not to get a nationally televised game
That's a great
on
question.
Christmas Day. Or like, what would it take? Genuinely, like, would Manhattan have to burn down to the ground or something?
Yeah.
I think even then they might put them on there. I can't. They gotta. I complain about this every single year, and I'm going to do it again. 20 nationally televised games for the Knicks this year. 20. How?
At least they're a playoff team now.
Am I the only one who, whenever I see the Knicks on like ESPN or TNT, I'm like, I'll watch something else? Those games are just not compelling to me ever. They're slugfests. I don't find them entertaining. I don't like watching that team. And I don't really know anybody that does like watching them. So to me, it's bizarre. Obviously, they drive ratings. For the life of me, I don't know.
Well, they are the Knicks. And if they have a Christmas Day game with Pablo Prigioni being rolled out as a starting point guard, it's going to take a lot to not have them be on Christmas Day. It's going to take a lot.
The
Thankfully,
stars
you get them out of the way early.
The stars are out. Quentin Richardson, Eddie Curry, your New York Knick.
Yeah, boy, Eddie Curry is really just pulling one out of the bag. But you're right. But at least they're a playoff team. The brand of basketball that they play is not at all exciting. I mean, Jalen Brunson is exciting. But it's a slow Tom Thibodeau style of basketball that is perfect to get out of the way at noon. And then you can get on to the other teams that play with more tempo and, their offense is a little more electric. So, yeah, I don't know what it would take to get the Knicks off there. I mean, maybe they, even if they were like disbanded, they might just play like an old Knicks game in that spot anyway, like in memory. Guys, anything else on the schedule before we move on to our next topic?
No, I didn't even know we had this much schedule talk in us. I mean, this went way longer than
Aaron. We're starved.
I was looking forward to the upcoming topic, so maybe I'm biased, but I just didn't think we were going to go that long on the schedule. Jasper had a lot to say. Jasper absolutely carried that segment.
Yeah, I don't know, man. This schedule got me heated. I don't know. Adam Silver, he's on my last nerve today. I don't know what it is, but I had to go into this thing because I just truly think this is one of the most bizarre NBA schedules I've seen in a really long time, and I don't know what the NBA is doing. So we'll see. It'll be fun, but I also am really looking forward to this next segment. So I'm just going to be quiet. I'm going to let Mike in.
Yes, we're going to play a little game of true or false with some discussion about each. I've got 7 true or false questions for you of varying things that could happen throughout the Pistons season. And I want you guys to give me if it's going to be true or if it's going to be false, and then give me just a little bit of a reason why. Some of them are going to be player specific. Actually, I think all of them are player specific, but I have an 8th question that I did not put on our notes sheet that I didn't want you to think about too much ahead of time. So true or false? Aaron, I'm going to start with you so you can answer first, and then we'll just rotate. So Jasper will take the next one, and then so on and so forth. So true or false question number 1. There's been a lot of hype about Cade Cunningham with Team USA. Will Cade Cunningham lead the team in points per game?
Yes. True. I think Cade is going to have a big season. I've remained constant in my belief that Cade Cunningham is the guy, was the guy when the Pistons drafted him, is the guy now. All of the talk that we're hearing across the league is Cade Cunningham is dominating the competition. He's ready to go for next year. I think Cade is getting the recognition and he's going to prove he deserved it once the season starts back up. And even if that doesn't translate to success in the win and loss record, it's going to be very clear that Cade Cunningham is that guy. And a lot of those guys lead their team in points per game, even with some of the other guys that can score the ball in bunches. I just think there's no other person that can do it like Cade can. We saw it in his rookie year, especially in the second half of his rookie year. He could get it going and he could score in so many different ways. He's going to be more mature now. He should be healthier, better body, stronger body. Hopefully the jump shot's a little bit more developed, a little bit more consistent. Cade's the number one guy. He's the number one option. I don't see anyone else beating him out in this category. True, Cade Cunningham will lead the Pistons in points per game this upcoming season.
Yep, I'm in lockstep with you here. There's only two reasons why Cade would not be the leading scorer for Detroit. The first one would be that the season is a complete disaster and a wash again, where he is hurt and in and out of the lineup, and Bojan Bogdanovic is once again forced to be the primary offensive option in terms of scoring. The other reason would be that Jaden Ivey takes a huge leap. And that is, it could happen. I don't think it's realistic that he would overtake Cade. But I think those are the only two reasons why Cade Cunningham would not be the leading scorer for Detroit this year. I'm absolutely expecting 20 plus points per game from him. Anything else would definitely be a disappointment.
Okay. Good answers. I think he's also going to lead the team in points per game. The only scenarios where that doesn't happen, I think, Jasper, you had mentioned it. If Cade becomes more of a run the offense guy and less of a needs to score kind of a guy, and Jaden Ivey takes that step, but I don't see that happening. Based on the role that Team USA is having him play, I don't see that sort of going in that direction. They're going to be reliant on his ability to score the basketball, in addition to spreading it out, hopefully with more shooters on the roster. So I agree. He should be leading the team in points per game. True or false? Jasper, you're up first. Jaden Ivey will lead the team in assists per game.
I'm going to say false. I think it will be Cade Cunningham. He's still, in my opinion, the best passer on this team. He's the most complete offensive player, and he is the guy that the offense should run through ultimately. I've been very clear. I think Jaden Ivey should be the guy bringing the ball up the floor more often because he is so fast and quick, and I think that he can create instant matchup problems for teams if he's just taking the ball up the floor, whether it's in transition or even in the half court. If he can catch teams unaware, he is going to be able to get downhill. And I think that that's going to be a huge boon for Detroit. But ultimately, when the Pistons are playing the majority of their sets in the half court, it is going to be running through Cade Cunningham. He is going to be the guy, in my opinion, that will lead the team in assists. I think he'll be about an assist and a half per game above Jaden Ivey. I anticipate Jaden being more of a shooting guard this year than he was last year. So I will say false.
Shoot, sorry for the lack of debate, but I agree with Jasper. I mean, pretty much for all the same reasons, right? Ball's going to be in Cade Cunningham's hands. The talk out of Team USA is, they used him, in that Luka Doncic type role where he's running everything. And if I'm the Pistons, if I'm Monty Williams, that's how I'd like to use Cade Cunningham. I think even if they didn't use him like that, Cade's just a guy that it moves the ball, isn't the type of star to where even if he does average 25 a game, he's still going to be moving the ball. It's not going to be a Cade took 27 shots tonight and has 2 assists to show for it. It's going to be, he scored 25, but he ended up dishing out 9 assists. Like, Cade just naturally gets into every possession like that. He's going to have the ball in his hands a ton. I think Jaden Ivey is, again, going to benefit from in a scoring way of he's not going to be asked to do as much ball handling and distributing responsibilities with Cade back on the court. So Yeah, I think Cade leads the team in assists, so I'll go false on Jaden Ivey leading the team in assists per game.
Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not comparing the two players, but I think of Cade as somebody like LeBron James in the sense of like LeBron would average 30 points a game, and you would be like, no, but he's a pass first player. And exactly to what you said, Aaron. Like I think even if Cade was averaging 25 points per game, he would still be a pass first player, a create for others first player. I don't.
All right. So not a whole lot of deviation so far. We'll go on to our next question. Aaron, is Isaiah Stewart going to average, or I guess rather true or false, Isaiah Stewart will average 5+ 3-point attempts per game for the season?
Dude, I'm going to say false. This was a tough one for me because I could see it being true. I'm going to lean false because I think there's too many guys that are going to be vying for minutes at the 4 and 5 spot. And I just don't know if the Pistons need Isaiah Stewart taking that many 3-point shots a game. Now, if Isaiah Stewart comes out and is shooting 37%, 38% from the 3-point line, then it's a different story. But from what we've seen so far in his career, despite what's been said, the numbers don't point to Stewart being this great floor spacer yet. So if there's not a legitimate jump in efficiency, I don't want to see this type of volume from Stewart. I will say false here.
So for what it's worth, he averaged 4.1 3-point attempts per game last year. So essentially just adding one more attempt per game.
Yeah.
Just for context.
I'm going to say this. Last year, there were 69 players that averaged 5 or more 3-point attempts per game. 7 of them played power forward primarily. And that's even including guys like Kyle Kuzma. I have a very hard time seeing that happen. Do I think he could be shooting like 4 per game? If you would put it at 4, I would have to think a lot harder. But in order for him to be at 5 per game, he would have to be one of the more prolific 3-point shooting power forwards in the league. Again, we've talked about this a million times. Whether or not he gets to that point is to be seen. But this year, I have a very, very hard time seeing that. 5 would be a lot. I mean, shoot, last year, Bojan Bogdanovic attempted 6 3-pointers per game. So for context, that's a lot of volume for a guy that just has not really proven it. So I'm going to say false as well.
Okay. In lockstep so far. True or false, Jasper? Ausar Thompson finishes top 3 for Rookie of the Year.
Oh, I hate that you're going to do this to me. Mike. I am going to say, against my better judgment, I'm going to say true. And I really have a hard time saying true because he's playing in Detroit. He's not like he's going to be the first option. He is going to be a tertiary player. He probably isn't even going to start to begin the season. But when you look at the other rookies in this class and what their roles will be, I think he has an excellent opportunity to where if the Pistons can improve their record and he can be a big part of that, I think he can, much like Scotty Barnes, a guy who was not the focal point of the team by any means, but did all those little things right. I think he can kind of have a candidacy like that. Whereas your Victor Wembanyama's and your Scoot Hendersons of the world will definitely show more of the out-and-out star qualities. I think when you look around the league, there's certainly other candidates, other guys that we liked. We're talking about your Jarris Walkers and your Brandon Millers, and of course your Amen Thompsons too. But when I look at the role that he's going to play, I think that it has a chance to be very clear. And when rookies step into a role that's really clearly defined for them, they are able to meet more success. He's going to have opportunities. I actually think, yes, he will finish in the top 3 of Rookie of the Year voting.
So I guess this will be our first disagreement. I'm going to say false. I'll tell you who I think is likely to rank ahead of him, and that's Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson. And I don't know if this is a dark horse pick, but is my pick for Rookie of the Year. And that's Chet Holmgren. So,
Aaron, I forgot about Chet. Yeah, he's a rookie. He's got that Blake Griffin thing going on, doesn't he?
So I've got those three ahead of him, and then I think he falls into like that next tier of guys that are probably just unfortunately on the outside. Even if they do have good rookie years, I just don't think they're going to have the opportunity of those three. He fits in there with Jarris Walker, Amon Thompson, those types of guy. If Brandon Miller is actually not as bad as he looked in summer league, so I think he fits more in there. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean he can't have a very good rookie season, and there's still a chance he sneaks into that top three. I just think the pathway there for him is a little difficult.
I will say I forgot about Chet. I forgot that he has Rookie of the Year eligibility. That does change it for me. But you know what? Screw it. I'm still gonna stick with True. Stick to your guns, baby. Pistons.
There you go. I thought about Chet in the middle of Jasper's answer, and that did kind of throw a wrench in my true or false. But he's still going to have lots of lead up time. He might be on a minutes restriction. It could really, it could be a slow grind for him to be back into playing, significant minutes every single night. So I don't mind the Ausar Thompson pick for top 3 for Rookie of the Year. It's bold, but if there's an injury that happens to an already depleted, or not really depleted, but an already thin, wing, wing room here in Detroit, I wouldn't be surprised if he's just a guy that you can't really take off the floor. Similarly to Mikal Bridges with Monty Williams in Phoenix, he's a guy that might just do enough to. You can't really not have him on the floor because he does the little things. He gets up and down, plays defense, showed some good stuff in summer league. So bold to have him top 3, but I agree with Jasper. I think it's still within the realm of possibility.
Real quick, Aaron, if Mike had said the top 4, would that change your answer?
I probably would have put him in there. I not that it's a lock, but I think it's a greater chance that he ends up in the top 4 than he does top 3.
Okay. I was just wondering where you stood on that because, like I said, I forgot about the Chet thing, and that changed it for me. But okay, cool.
Okay. I don't know who has next for answering because I already have
my honors.
Pushed that. Okay. It's Aaron. Okay. So true or false? James Wiseman averages 20 plus minutes per game.
God, I hope that's false. I'm going to say false just off of my feelings that I'm not a huge James Wiseman guy until he proves otherwise. If James Wiseman's averaging 20 minutes per game and, Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart are on the roster, to me, that's not that means some things went wrong. I probably, Marvin Bagley probably has a right to minutes just as much as James Wiseman does too. I think it would be disappointing if James Wiseman would average 20 minutes per game, but I don't know. We could see it. We could see it. I almost want to say true with my mind, but false with not my mind. So I guess I'm going to say false, but I don't feel great about the pick.
Oh, I am going to disagree with you on this, Aaron. I am going to say true. And the reason is I don't believe that the Pistons roster is finalized yet. Maybe I'm misguided. Maybe I have more belief than I should, but I still do think that there is another move to come. I still just have such a hard time seeing Marvin Bagley being on this roster to open the season. And that's why I will say true. I still think you're at the point with Jalen Duren. I'm not sure you want to play him more than 30 minutes a game. I do think that there's something to, especially for young athletic big men, to actually limiting their minutes a little bit just to cut down on the wear and tear and take advantage of their athletic advantages. The more you play, the harder it is to recover and keep that advantage. So for me, I'd like to keep Jalen Duren's minutes down a little bit. I do think there will be a little bit of experimenting with those two big lineups as well. So I could see something happening like Jalen Duren playing 29 minutes a game and James Wiseman playing like 21. and them having about 2 minutes of overlap. I think that seems to me, especially if Marvin Bagley's off the roster, and doubly so if Isaiah Stewart is playing power forward full time, I definitely see that happening. But I think regardless of whether or not he does hit that, he's going to be somewhere in that like 18 to 22 minutes a game range.
So for added context, James Wiseman averaged 25.2 minutes per game last year, just a hair above Jalen Duren's 24.9. Marvin Bagley was ninth. So it actually was Wiseman, Duren, Bagley were 7, 8, 9 in terms of minutes per game for the Pistons last year. So I unfortunately see it as well. I see him getting the 20 minutes, especially with how hell-bent the front office seems to be on getting him playing time to see if there's anything there. But there is a move that is going to have to be made at some point. There's just too much overlap between all the bigs and all the point guards. Something's going to have to happen. That could be moving on from Wiseman. That could be moving on from one of the other bigs to give him more minutes. It's not an optimal outcome, but Jasper, I agree with you more that it could be, he goes down to about 20 to 21 minutes per game. Duren gets an uptick, but Wiseman's the primary backup center and, ends up being the guy that takes the brunt of, if Duren's in foul trouble, he just kind of is an innings eater. Or, if the matchup is just not suiting Duren, then Wiseman goes in and just kind of, absorbs some contact for, like 20 to 25 minutes per game.
Yeah, I mean, and look, we can talk about, we know Saddiq Bey's value cratered over the last 2 years, but you made an investment in James Wiseman. You do have, it's not a super significant one, but you also have a financial investment in him. You're paying him about the same amount of money as most of the best backup bigs in the league make. And I don't think he's one of the best backup bigs in the league right now. So I think considering that you traded somebody like Saddiq Bey for him, and that you are paying him significantly, of course, that's all proportional. I think that you kind of have to give him 20 minutes a game. Otherwise, that just comes back to the question, why did you trade for him at all?
Right. And we kind of pounded that drum throughout the year of okay, you traded for James Wiseman. Are you going to play him? Because clearly you traded something of value for something that we're not sure had any value. So do you plan on trying to extract value, and how is that going to work with Duren? So I think that's going to have to happen again this year. They're going to be trying the too big thing for some ungodly reason. And, you're going to see Wiseman get plenty of minutes to try to lift up his value as much as they possibly could. Okay, let's go on to, I think we only have 2 more left. And these are both kind of similar questions, but should get some interesting answers. True or false, Bojan Bogdanovic will still be on the roster past the trade deadline?
Is this one for me? I think this one's for me.
I believe so.
I am going to say, once again, against my better judgment, I am going to say true. I think that he is going to be on the roster past the trade deadline. I anticipate the Pistons treading enough water to where they still feel like they can maybe sneak into the play-in game. And this is another thing that I actually had not thought about until right this moment, maybe they do well in those tournament games. Maybe they win 3 of 4 and they make the knockout rounds and they actually feel like, hey, this is something we want to win. This is progress for our team, and therefore we will keep Bojan Bogdanovic. There's definitely going to be suitors, but we've seen this before from Troy Weaver. He's not going to make a move unless he feels like he is getting what he wants from it. So I actually think Bojan Bogdanovic, against my better judgment and maybe against common sense, will be on the team.
I think it's true. The Pistons need good players. Bogdanovic is a good player. One of their guys that they can rely on to space the floor. One of the few veterans on the roster. On a good contract, should continue to age just fine for his skill set and what the Pistons need him to do. I think it's true. I hope it's true, unless there's some serious regression in his level of play. again, I feel like I'm in this boat where I almost feel like what Bogdanovich did last year was a bit underrated, and he doesn't get the respect that I feel like he deserves for how good he was last year. So I'm going to say true because I think it's what the Pistons need. I think the Pistons need a guy like Bogdanovich. So I hope he's still on the team past the deadline.
You're right, Aaron. He was underrated last year. You're totally right. And yeah, I mean, the thing too, for you look at his contract, they have him under contract for another year. You know, if you ask me, is he on the roster next season? That might change my answer. I could see that changing in the offseason. But yeah, for the reasons you just said, Aaron, he's one of their best shooters. They need him on the floor. And I think they still need him on this roster, even if they're not.
I feel like we're going to be inundated with Bogdanovich trade rumors like we were last year for months leading up to the deadline. It's going to be inevitable again, especially if he continues to shoot well like he did last year, sort of anchor an offense that was pretty depleted after Cade's injury. We're going to be talking about Bogdanovich trade rumors again for months and months and months. I hope he's still on the roster because that means that the Pistons are playing well. So ideally, he's still on the roster. Okay, last, true or false. I didn't really want this to be the last one because it's not very climactic, but it just kind of ended up being that way. True or false? Killian Hayes will still be on the roster past the trade deadline.
I don't know if this is the answer that people are expecting. I'm going to say true. I think if he's on this team to start the season, he will finish the season with this team. If the Pistons can't find a team going into next year that's sort of in a rebuilding fashion, you know, a team like Washington, for example, where they can maybe take some flyers on some guys that haven't panned out, kind of like Detroit started doing, you know, a couple of years ago when Troy came in. If they can't find a team that wants to take a flyer on him, I mean, the Pistons just don't have the minutes right now for Killian Hayes. Odds are minutes open up at various points throughout the season due to injuries. But again, if they don't have a team now that wants to take him on, I think it's going to be harder in January or February when Hayes likely isn't in the rotation to get a team to give up anything that matters to take on Killian Hayes. So I'll say true because if they don't move him before the start of the season, I think he's going to be there at the end of the season.
I am going to say false. And even more so than that, I'm going to say this. I've said it before. I don't believe that their roster is finalized. I do not think Killian Hayes will be on the roster to start the season. And I'm going to throw that out there. However, like exactly for the reasons you just said, though, Aaron, if he is on the roster to start the season, he will be finishing the season with the Pistons. I don't see that changing by the deadline. That's just, yeah, I mean, I don't really see the playing time. I just don't see how he could possibly work his way into being a viable trade asset in January, at least more than he is now. So yeah, my answer is false. I don't think he's even going to start the season with the Pistons. But for the same reasons Aaron just said, if he does, then I would anticipate him finishing the season.
Okay, guys, that was my little true or false game. I'm going to withhold the 8th question for another date, maybe the next true or false game we play a little closer to the season, so we can see what some of these trades look like, how it impacts the Pistons and whatnot. But 7 questions, you guys gave me 7 good answers each. A little bit of fun, yeah, a little bit. I thought a little bit different from what we normally do.
I really enjoyed that. I want to do that again.
Yeah, I'm 100%. We need our slop. We got to make our own slop, fellas. That's what right. I'm really learning. I'm 30 now. So, you know, I have a lot of wisdom in these old bones of mine, these old creaky bones. and I have to say, yeah, a lot of fun. Let's absolutely keep doing this because you know what? Even if there isn't a ton of news around the Pistons, there are always storylines with this team. There are so many interesting little tidbits about where they're going. We just really are in this place where we don't know what the future holds for Detroit. So yeah, totally right, Aaron. That was fun. Let's keep doing it.
I'm planning on it. I am planning on it. All right, guys, good podcast. We covered the schedule. I'm sure we'll have more thoughts pop up after this podcast, and for the schedule reveal and all of the news to come hereafter. Certainly hope that all of you listeners will join us again as we continue to hurtle towards the beginning of the NBA season. Now it feels more real with the schedule being announced. It just feels like it's on the horizon, more so than it has before, leading up to this day. Guys, anything else before we close out this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast?
Good show, gentlemen. It was great to be back on with the both of you. And yeah, I had a lot of fun. A longer episode. We haven't had one this long, probably in a minute. But I thought it was a great. So hope to do it again.
Yeah, it's Doc Rivers here. I just want to say I'm really looking forward to calling games this year. It should be a great time.
Yeah, I actually am. I will say, shout out Doc Rivers. I'm actually excited to hear him call games again. People have said they're, Doc Rivers. Nah. People, if you remember the Pistons 04 finals run, Doc was freaking awesome in the booth. I'm actually really looking forward to having him back. I think that's what he's best at, if I'm being completely honest. So, just a small little thing. I also never thought that I would have so much to say about any schedule, including my own. But here we are, and I'm happy to talk about it with you guys. So, great stuff.
Well, I'm happy to talk about it with you too, and I'm glad that you had so much to talk about. It's good conversation. It's good to have this bit of banter here between all three of us. You're right. We have not had this long of a podcast in quite some time. Well, guys, that's going to do it for this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. I'd like to thank our sponsor this week, that's BetOnline. And of course, if you haven't used BetOnline yet, you can use our promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit using BetOnline. For my co-hosts, Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia, I am Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, part of the Believe Network, and we will see you all next time.